Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest, absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. Hey, y'all. Welcome to the show. Right now, it's just a couple of days for the first day of fall, and I decided I'd go ahead and do our fall foraging show. Really, not because of anything having to do with the date on the calendar, but because the animals and the plants have decided it is fall. It's still pretty warm, so we'll get into a little late summer foraging as well. But I always know when fall is coming in the mountains because the bears start digging up beehives. All the underground, the subterranean bees. The bears are obviously not the most conscientious environmentalists. They go around and dig them up and eat them. And the holes are starting to pop up all over the place, showing the bears have been out at night harvesting beehives. But also, just up from my house is a little spot that I don't really tell people about. I'm not going to tell you where it is either. It's it's a little bit of a hike. It's kind of a tuck back hidden place. There used to be an old homestead there. It's long gone. The only signs of it are a spring that looks like it was cased in maybe in the 1930s. So the spring isn't that old. The house was probably there long before they cased in the spring. In fact, I can probably tell you who cased in that spring. There was one particular builder and plumber in Vilas, North Carolina, that pretty much invented, he and his father almost invented the technique for casing springs and running plumbing to people's houses in the mountains of North Carolina. They first did it it was for the family that owned the Mass General Store in Valley Cruces and for the Banner family of Banner Elk. Mass General Stores now all over the place. I mean, you'll see franchises in Asheville and various places, but it originated in Valley Cruces. And when the pipes became available as the railroads started coming through, the man who owned the Mass General Store, his family, and the ones that were the Banners up in Banner Elk, they were doctors and, founding family up there. They wanted indoor plumbing. And they called the best local builder in the area, and he and his son, who I believe was still under the age of 18 at that point, figured out how to join pipes. They figured out how to create pressure to pump water up to a house. And basically, this was just a pipe going into a house with cold water continuously pouring out into a basin. There was no on or off, there were no taps, there was no hot water heater, but there was water in the house. And that would have been early 1900s, Avery County, North Carolina. And that fellow, he went on, he built most of the schools and municipal buildings throughout the mountains of North Carolina. The old rock schoolhouse there in Banner Elk, the one out in Pendleton and Ashe County, the municipal building that used to be in Boone. Beautiful architecture. He was a very talented man. And back then everybody was self-taught. Nobody went to school to learn stuff. They learned on the job, they learned through their own ingenuity, and they were incredible people. I mean, the feats of what we call hillbilly engineering would stand up against the most educated architects and woodworkers and certainly musicians and et cetera in the world. Very creative people. When people have to work hard and figure it out on their own, they can really do amazing things. So anyway, this whole springs up there, and right, maybe 30 yards from it is a big old apple tree. And apples, are not native to North America, only the crab apple is. So wherever you see an apple tree means usually someone planted an apple tree, and they're usually planted where there's an old homestead. So up there on that hill is just the most incredible place to spot game and hunt you can imagine. It's tucked down just a little bit in the valley. The woods are up behind it going, all those woods go clear up into the national forest. I mean, there's no encroachment from development. And above the spring, the turkeys will nest in the trees, wild turkeys. The deer will come down to the spring and drink, a few times a day. Um, Raccoons and squirrels and rabbits are always around there, and bears, black bears. And I don't tell people about it because it's just too easy. I mean, it would be easy to exhaust that resource. The animals have to have a place to drink. And when you find where they all go to drink in this little tucked in area out of the wind, and the turkeys are roosting in the trees, you know you're going to have abundant game there. And it'd be easy to overexploit that resource and wipe out that game for future generations. So I don't tell people where it is, but I know it's fall because I went up there the other day, and sitting under that apple tree was about a 450-pound black bear sitting there eating windfall apples. And the yellow jackets that land on the apples, she was just eating those too. So it's not the season. It's way too hot. I mean, you know, deer season around here may actually begin into August with bow season and really heats up in September. As far as I'm concerned, it's way too hot to take any meat. The main reason most people, or most of the people who say they don't like wild game, don't like wild game is because it wasn't handled properly in the field. Someone took a deer and, maybe they field dressed it properly, but then they went and carried it around and showed it off or drove it 20 or 30 miles in the heat, in 80 or 90-degree weather to get to a deer processor. You don't do that. You handle your meat in the field the same way you would handle your meat in a pack house and in the grocery store and in your home. You get it cleaned and cold as fast as possible, and you keep it clean and cold. We don't want to eat spoiled food. And that's something that so few people understand. I don't know why that is, but as far as bears, I mean, come on. That's a big, heavy animal with a lot of fat and a thick coat. And if you don't handle that meat right and get it dressed out and skinned and quartered and cooled down right away, I mean, you do have to take the skin off because that animal is insulated. And you want to, cold weather, and you want to get as cold as possible, as quickly as possible. And when people say oh, I don't like bear meat, well, they don't like bear meat because they had bear meat that was half spoiled before it was frozen. That's pretty much usually the reason. I mean, sometimes bears have been eaten out of trash cans and dumpsters and such, and of course, nobody's going to want to eat that. But bear meat is actually quite good. So is raccoon meat. They're slightly related animals if they have been eating clean and they're handled properly, if they're dressed properly. So that bear's up there eating apples and out of season. So I just positioned myself where the breeze was blowing toward me. So the bear did not scent me. If the breeze is blowing away from you toward the animal, they know you're there. And that can be pretty dangerous when it comes to bears. Really very dangerous. And I just sat there and, watched the bear eat apples for a while. It was just really peaceful and nice to do. And that means, yes, it is fall. I can hear the turkeys calling back and forth in the woods and, a little chill at night. And yeah, probably my favorite time of year. When it comes to foraging, this is the time of abundance. When it comes to farming and wildcrafting or just gardening, this is the time of abundance. But, you know, it's funny, our black bears are nowhere near as big as the grizzly bears out. But my word, they can be ferocious. My neighbor, literally next door neighbor, just a few years ago, this is a tough guy. 3 tours in Vietnam, 20, 30 some years as a deputy sheriff, This is a guy that's he can handle himself. And he's lying there at night, and 3, 4 in the morning, he hears a noise. He thinks somebody's trying to break in his house. So he grabs his pistol and goes to the door. He opens the door, and in crashing through the screen door, almost on top of him, was I think a 490-pound black bear. He put 5 rounds dead center in that bear's chest as it's on his hind legs, getting ready to crash down on top of him. It barely phased him. The first few shots. Finally, the bear did back off, went outside and died. But that bear was coming for him that night. That bear was coming into that house to kill and eat that man. And that's life. I talk to my friends in Europe where they don't have the crime rate like we do for one thing, but they also don't have bears and coyotes and all that. And they're like, "Why do you need guns?" Well, yeah, there's a reason right there. know, that bear had also knocked out a car window in their driveway and crawled in the car at night looking for food. That was an aggressive bear, and it's not for lack of food. They have plenty of food in that area. It's because we live in their habitat, and they have teeth and claws and huge weight and muscles to protect themselves or to attack us, and we don't have all that, but we have guns, and we can protect ourselves, and we can take some bear meat. So now I have to decide, is it worth buying a new freezer? Yeah, with inflation the way it is and meat prices going up, another chest freezer may not be a bad idea if I can put about 400 pounds of bear meat in it, carry me for a couple of years until we get some common sense back in the economy. So let's talk a little bit about foraging. First of all, I said, it's still late summer, and you will still see some of those wonderful late summer um, edibles. And one of my absolute favorites is blackberries, or black raspberries, as they're technically called. This is the time of year for the blackberries, and they're just delicious. I used to have a Weimaraner, and in every other regard, that dog was absolutely dumb. She used to start fights with every dog she saw and then turn and run away. So they were always attacking her and just ripping her to shreds. I learned more about veterinary medicine working on that dog than anything I ever learned formally in a class or out of a book. But she was smart in one regard, and as she saw me eating something, she knew it was edible and she would eat it. So we had 2 old apple trees in the yard. She saw me eating apples, and she would lay under those apple trees and eat windfalls until she could barely get up and move. Her abdomen would be so swollen and full she looked like a pregnant goat. But when it came to blackberries, she saw me eating blackberries and she figured out they were edible. So she would go up there, blackberries are very thorny, and she'd pull her lips back as the old folks used to say, look like a mule eating briars, grinning real big with your lips pulled back. She would pull her lips back and she would eat one blackberry at a time until she wiped them out. If I didn't get to them first, that dog would eat all those blackberries, and they are delicious. Blackberries, the larger ones that get a lot of sunlight and good rain and all that, they tend to be sweet. The smaller ones can be sour and peppery. And what's so cool about that, really, is if you get a good mix of them, you can make a blackberry wine that would rival the finest Pinot Noir in the world, or really more like a Syrah or a Shiraz. It has that kind of peppery note to it. And the way you do that is so easy. Crush 1 gallon of blackberries to make 1 gallon of wine. A gallon of blackberries is not going to be a full liquid gallon of wine. We're talking a gallon by weight or a gallon by volume. There's going to be little air spaces between the berries. So you're going to want to top that off with a little sugar water or some apple juice, grape juice, whatever you got. It doesn't have to be anything fancy because those blackberries are going to have so much flavor. All you're going to taste is just pure blackberries. So you get a 5 gallon bucket, spend an afternoon picking blackberries. They're probably the easiest fruit to crush. You can literally just crush them by hand. Some people would then strain out the pulp and the skins. I like to ferment everything on the skins because you get the tannins and the flavor. You get the character of the wine. Put that in a carboy. A carboy is a big glass jug they used to have bottled water in. When they used to put big water bottles in office buildings, people would take little paper cups and drink out of them. If you don't have a carboy, and they are getting to be hard to find, you can use the modern 5-gallon water jugs that you trade out at the grocery store. If you keep a few of those, they're easy to use. Or a 5-gallon food grade bucket. You have what's called a bung, which is a stopper, a rubber stopper that'll fill a hole, and you put a fermentation lock in there, a little air lock or a bubbler, which will allow the carbon dioxide to escape and not allow the air to get back in. And then just add, whatever the yeast is of your choice. You can use a nice, Red Star wine yeast. Was it Lin, maybe? I don't know. I can't remember. There's some wine yeasts that are specifically good for what we call country wines or fruit wines, something other than a grape. Or you can use bread yeast. Or if you really want to go old fashioned, you can hope that the yeast in the air or that were already on the fruit colonize it and the wine makes itself. Wine makes itself. That was a debate I got into years ago with some, religious people that were very well-meaning. I respect them a lot, but they tried to tell me that, uh, people in biblical days didn't drink wine that was grape juice. I'm like, look, y'all, that whitish bloom that is on a grape, that's yeast. Yeast is already trying to ferment that grape before it's ever picked. It's on all the fruit, it's on all our flowers. The minute they pick that fruit and that yeast mixed with the juice, wine began to be made. They didn't have pasteurization, they didn't have refrigeration, they didn't have any way to prevent grape juice from becoming wine. And actually, about 90% of the alcohol in wine is produced in the first 24, 48 hours of fermentation. There is no way that, Jesus, who made wine in the Bible, by the way, if drinking wine was evil, Jesus, who made wine, could therefore, by definition, not be God. So you cannot be a Christian and actually believe that drinking wine is inherently evil, because if you do, our own God sinned, and we know God cannot sin. Um, but there's absolutely no way that Jesus did not drink wine. In the Passover meal, uh, the cup of wine is an essential part of that. So we know at least at one point he made wine, and at least at another point he drank wine. But wine was wine, and wine is still wine, and wine makes itself. Wine is a gift from God and natural, and people just need to use things the way they should be used and don't misuse them. And that's true of anything. I'm always trying to remind people, look, you can kill yourself by drinking too much water, literally. That happens in fraternities with hazing routines. They have people drinking gallons of water until they throw up. Well, some of them drop dead. So um, there's nothing unnatural or immoral about the process of making wine. It's all up to the human being who consumes it, how they act. But yes, it's a wonderful time for blackberries, and I absolutely love blackberries. And of course, blackberries are also medicinal herbal medicine. The leaves are used. Um, Let's see, what else might we find this time of year? Well, most of the summer berries have come to an end. Other than the blackberries, we're not seeing any more the blueberries and the strawberries of spring and July. More than likely, you've got some flowering mints, very edible, of course. This is really the time to look for your prickly pear cactus and your Indian fig cactus. These were grown for food on many old homesteads. You'll see them all over the place. The purple fruits that grow on the cactus are absolutely wonderful. Some of them are very, very tasty, very fruity. Others are bland, but all of them have sort of a kiwi-like quality to them. What you want to do is either use heavy gloves or take a towel and go out and cut the fruit off the plant directly into a bucket. You're trying not to get the spines in your hands, right? Then go home and take a plumber's torch or any kind of propane torch and burn the spines off. Some people say you can hold them over a burner with tongs. Yeah, you probably can. A gas burner. But I think a torch is a little more efficient. And then you crush them, strain the seeds out. There'll be tons of seeds. And you can use that to make jams, jellies. You can cut up the fruit and eat it. Like, kiwi. Just scoop the seeds out or spit the seeds out, of course. And or you can make a very nice prickly pear cactus wine. And the nice thing about prickly pear, it is also medicinal in that it helps balance out blood sugar spikes. It helps prevent the highs and the lows. So the prickly pear pads, especially, which they call tunas in Mexican grocery stores, It's because the Latin name of the plant is Optunia, by the way. It has nothing to do with the fish. Prickly pear pads or nopales, you may see that word nopales. They're very good for diabetics. They help with insulin resistance. Another one that's still around, good time to pick, is Indian cucumber. Indian cucumber is Mediola virginiana. The root tastes like a cucumber, and they are abundant where I live, and they are where you live. Grab some. I don't see them as actually a substitute for cucumber. I love cucumbers, but it does have that, slight kind of bright, kind of fresh taste. Daylilies, some varieties are still blooming. Your daylily blossoms are always edible. Good time to harvest sweet flag, calamus. The root is edible, but that's when we use more as a medicinal. And let me just go ahead and warn you not to eat a whole root of sweet flag as if it was just an edible and not a medicinal, because it will cause you to hallucinate. And some people find it most unpleasant. It's scared a lot of people off of eating wild food. Chuffa or nutsedge, good time to spot your chuffa. Pull it up and eat those nut-like roots. Mallows, you probably still spot some mallow flowers. There's probably still some watercress in the creek if you've got a good clean creek and you don't have to worry about contamination. Remember, you never want to drink downstream from the herd. I don't care if they're cattle or humans. And let me go ahead and recommend the book you might hear me flipping through because it has loud pages. Now, in the past, in other episodes, I recommended Peterson Field Guide to Wild Edible Plants. I've recommended Bradford Angier's Feasting on Wild Edibles. I've recommended various books. One that's been on my shelf for years that I totally forgot about is Edible Wild Plants, a North American Field Guide. It's published by the Sterling Company, and the authors are Elias and Dykman. I don't know anything about these authors, but this is a really good, great, really introduction to foraging for wild edibles field guide for anybody. It's not a heavy botanical type book. It's got some great color photos. It covers really all of the United States, so it has a lot of Western plants that I never see. It's got all the ones I see as well. And the descriptions are fantastic. The pictures are great. And I picked this up used for maybe $4. I don't know. Let's see. When was it published? It was published in 1990. So it's not a terribly old book. And I definitely, absolutely one I recommend. Get this one. And it's also broken down to seasons. So I'm flipping through the end of summer right now. Creeping snowberry, kinnikinick, different ones. Purslane, which the flowers are probably passed on that, but you can still harvest the plant. Purslane can be eaten like okra. It's very good. While I'm on that subject, let me go and say I absolutely recommend not just the books that cover general foraging for wild edibles, always have a field guide specific to your area. As I mentioned before, I've been spending a lot of time in the sand hills of North Carolina due to a family situation. And even common plants, even very closely related plants from the Appalachians, look very different down here. And there was one that I kept looking at, and it was just bugging me. It came out in spring, and every time I was down here, I'd see it pretty commonly. And at first I thought, well, that's chickweed. It looks like some kind of chickweed, Stellaria. And I got close enough to it, and the petals were not chickweed. The leaves look like chickweed. The stems look like chickweed. The petals were absolutely not chickweed. And I went to the North Carolina State University Plant ID site and found nothing. I mean, it was a loss. I went through all my books and I found nothing. And I asked a master gardener, and they're like, oh, that's just some kind of weed. We try to get rid of it. They didn't know what it was. Well, I finally got a field guide specific to the Sandhills region, which covers, parts of North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. And it turns out to be a fairly common weed here and also in Florida. It's called Mexican mint. That's one of the common names. No, I'm sorry, Mexican clover is one of the common names. Mexican clover. It's not a clover at all, actually. It's probably most common in Florida, where it just really grows all over the place. It's considered, sort of a ground cover plant, but really mostly a weed. And I looked this up. It's Richardia brasilensis. Um, Common name is Mexican clover, tropical white Mexican clover, or pusley. Pusley is a corruption of the word uh, purslane. The English called purslane pursley, and pusley was sort of a mispronunciation that became popular, and that usually signifies that it is actually an edible plant. So I did a little more research on it, and yeah, it's edible. It has a few medicinal values. It's not very strong, but it certainly was not chickweed. And I would never have known that had I not gotten a very specific field guide for that very specific area. So that's always, that's really something you want to keep in mind. All right, well, so where I live, the gooseberries are still coming in. If somebody planted a gooseberry before they banned importing them into the state, sweet fern is not a fern. It's a good edible plant. It's probably getting a little tough this time of year, but you can still keep it and dry it. Use it medicinally with tea. If you're down in the coastal area, it's a good time to look for the myrtles, wax myrtle, sweet gale. Um, those are very potent medicinal herbs. They are herbs that used to be used in the brewing of beer in large amounts that can cause hallucinations. And edibly, I'm going to say they're marginal. They're marginal edibly. Your New Jersey tea and Labrador tea can still be harvested. It's just a beverage. Sumacs are beginning to come in, and I have seen them all over the place. The sumac side of the road. This is not poison sumac. Poison sumac is an irritating plant that causes a rash like poison ivy. It has white berries. Sumacs proper have red berries, and they're edible and they're delicious. They're very high in vitamin C. They taste like lemonade. You have smooth sumac, you have staghorn sumac. They grow all over the place, and they're very common, especially in my region. The elders, you may be, well, yeah, you can probably still get some elderberries. You can always harvest juniper berries, cedar berries, well, juniper berries or Virginia cedar berries. Any of the juniper berries, if they're ripe, a lot of times the berries will hang on the plant for up to 2 years before they turn blue. If you happen to live where bay laurel grows, you can still harvest bay laurel pawpaws. Yeah, I think we're still in the pawpaw season. I don't have any pawpaws immediately near me, but there is a trail, a couple of trails I know where I can go and collect them. And I'm usually thinking of those around September. So I'm going to go ahead and just say, yeah, probably a good time for pawpaws and mulberries. I know one thing that's absolutely abundant this year, and it's usually considered to be a sign of a rough winter. The persimmon trees are loaded down. I have rarely seen wild American persimmons with more fruit than they have this year. The limbs are actually being pulled down to the ground by the weight of the persimmons. Persimmons are a wonderful fruit. They will never be a store fruit because by the time they're ripe, usually after the first frost, they're so soft you can absolutely not ship them anywhere, and they will spoil very quickly, once they're bruised and crushed. They're so sugary sweet, so mild, they're absolutely delicious. But if they are eaten before they're turn purple, before they get that frost or become incredibly, absolutely ripe, they are the most bitter things on earth. And if you go to the Grow Network, I've written a whole article on foraging wild persimmons, and I published my mother's persimmon bread recipe, which is absolutely delicious. And speaking of making wild wines, our early American ancestors, including George Washington, was fond of making a persimmon beer, which was really interesting. He would take barley cakes or probably another grain and mix them together with crushed, very ripe persimmons, and then brew that into a beer. And yeah, was very popular in colonial times. The service berries, the Saskatoons. There's another one, mountain. Oh, what is the name of that berry? Oh, it'll come to me in a minute. They should be coming in about right now. They're more abundant up north in New England, but they do grow along the Blue Ridge Mountains. One other that I know is definitely coming in right now is Jerusalem artichoke. And these are it's fall, it's time to harvest your Jerusalem artichokes. Jerusalem artichokes are not an artichoke and they're not from Jerusalem. Actually, is a derivation of the name Girasol, which was Spanish and basically means sunflower. They look like brown-eyed Susans or Rudbeckia, only the center is not brown, it's yellow. And the roots form little tubers, and these little tubers are very much like potatoes, but they contain inulin. Inulin means it will not spike a diabetic's blood sugar, but if you're not used to eating them, it will give you horrible, painful gas. But lots of these grow around here, and they're wonderful wild edible. This book recommends your American lotus and yellow pond lily. They are marginally edible, in my opinion. Basically, the yellow pond lily, spatterdock is what it's called, or nufar. This is basically the worst tasting wild edible a person can use. Michael Moore said it was a good bitter to stimulate the liver. Other than that, it has no redeeming value that I can find, except if you want to go way down into cold water in the fall and pull roots that are almost impossible to get out of a matted growth, knee deep in muck, and then come home and try to eat the worst tasting thing you've ever eaten. Well, if it's a survival situation that it's that bad, it may save your life, but I don't want it. And a lot of people say they get sick from eating the lotuses as well. It's one of those things that field guides and wild plant books recommend that if you've ever tried it, you're probably not going to try it twice. But one that is really good is arrowhead or duck potato, wapato. Now's the time to harvest your arrowheads. The whole plant's edible. The roots are like potatoes, but the flowers and leaves are also edible. Wild grapes are so in season right now. And I also have a great article on wild grapes on the Grow Network. Wild muscadines grow throughout my area. There's a Catawba wild grape, they're fox grapes. They're what they call frost grapes. Absolutely wonderful and so overlooked. I mean, I've mentioned so many times how people don't even see the grapes above their head and start pulling out the vines like weeds when they're just absolutely delicious. They're so nutritious. The leaves can be eaten as stuffed grape leaves. They can be put in with cucumbers to keep pickles crisp. You can make wonderful wines. The muscadine and scuppernine wine industry before Prohibition in North Carolina was as popular, more popular than California wines became in the 90s. We'll say 90s. I guess they began to get popular in the 70s and 80s, but they really hit their stride in the 90s. They're delicious grapes, absolutely delicious. And if you're not a wine drinker, you can still make grape hull preserves, which are a jelly essentially of the grapes with the hulls still in there. Oh my gosh, it's got such incredible flavor, especially with a homemade biscuit made with lard and buttermilk, buttered up, fresh and hot, with some of that grape hull preserves. I'm actually drooling thinking about it right now. There is a wild potato vine, and this is not the potato plant in the Solanaceae family proper potato. It's actually a morning glory, an empomia. Morning glory or empomia is actually the family that sweet potatoes come from. So they're small, and some are good, and some aren't so good. Wild morning glories grow all throughout the southeast, usually in cornfields and such. They actually have strong anti-cancer properties and very, very worth looking into and definitely worth using as food so long as you're not trying to pull them out of an old cornfield that's been soaked in Roundup and other horrible chemicals. Barberries are coming into season. They're ripe. Uh, Barberries are a wonderful bitter fruit. Um, we had the Oregon grape. They come in. Oregon grape's more of a midsummer plant. The barberries come in a little later. So good for the liver. They have antiseptic properties. Just barberries and Oregon grapes are one of our most important herbs. And speaking of important herbs, now is really the time to begin marking your herb for which we harvest the roots. Some plants say poke. Poke root is a great medicinal, wonderful, especially to cleanse the lymphatic system and help you get over viruses and such. You can spot your poke plants in the summer when they're full of purple berries. It will die down, and even in the middle of winter, you can still see sort of the skeleton of that plant there. And you know where it is if you look in the general area. Ginseng is another one. Ginseng will turn the leaves will turn just a bright, specific shade of gold here in the next few weeks, and you will see ginseng in the woods. And the berries will be up top, and those just brilliantly gold leaves. Some plants, though, they just die back completely to the ground, and for those, this is a very good time to just go in and mark them. You can get fancy and use the GPS on your phone and all that, and it'll tell you exactly where that plant is. Or you can just do what I do and stick something in the ground. to remind me of, where that plant is in, a couple more months when the top of the plant's died down and we won't be able to see it. We can still find the root and dig that up and use it for medicine. Spice bush is absolutely one of my favorite wild plants around here. It grows probably more in the mountains in North Carolina than it does really anywhere else in the southeast. It's often called wild allspice. The branches can be grilled, just like in Jamaica they use allspice woods to flavor their jerk chicken. The leaves are tea, but the berries are very nice too. And this is the time when the berries are coming into season, and a good time to spot it. You can kind of harvest from that plant all year, different parts of it. It's got some good medicinal values as well. It's in the same family as sassafras and bay laurel. If you're out west, the desert hackberries are coming in. Some places, the roses are beginning to kind of fade back and have rose hips. The only thing with rose hips is they have these little hairs, which used to be used as itching powder. You may get away with eating a few fresh rose hips straight off of the plant, but you probably want to take those back and crush them and press them through a tea strainer at the very least to get those little hairs out of there, because those same hairs that will irritate your nose and make you sneeze will irritate every part of your body from the time they enter your mouth to the time they leave your body, which, as you can imagine, could be quite unpleasant. The high bush cranberries are coming to season. That's a viburnum, a good fruit, very antispasmodic herb. Hobblebush is more one we get in our area. Um, they're interchangeable. They're both in the viburnum family. If you're up north, there's a plant called nannyberry, which is also a viburnum, or squashberry. Again, another viburnum that grows berries, and they all have antispasmodic properties. Very high in vitamin C. Wonderful plant to have. I mean, they taste like cranberries, and I love cranberries. Another sure sign of fall coming in. The squirrels are just going crazy out there harvesting acorns and hickory nuts. There are hickory nut halls all over the place, and I've seen them performing incredible acrobatics, climbing down oak branches down to the little twigs. I mean, the tiniest little twigs hanging upside down by their back toes, and picking off acorns and then flipping around and running back up that tree to go hide that acorn in the ground somewhere. The reason they do that, when they hide that acorn in the ground, the rain and the natural heat and cold will leach the tannins out of it, leaving a nice sweet nut. Most most acorns really shouldn't be eaten unless you leach those tannins out. There are a few that are low in tannin and can be eaten just like you would eat any other nut. Or ground into a meal, they make a nice flour. The only one that's really native to our area is white oak, and it's kind of hit and miss. You can get white oaks acorns that are sweet and nice and fresh from the tree. You can roast them, dry them out, parch them, whatever you want to do. Or you get one and you bite into it and it puckers your mouth just like a persimmon, and you have to go leach those tannins out of there. And the easiest way to do it is put them in a cloth bag, a mesh bag, and put them in the creek. Just let the creek water do it. Some people will actually put them in the tanks of their toilet and let the toilet leach the tannins out. Uh, Technically, I suppose that's okay. Enough people have done it, but to me, it seems a little unhygienic. Could just be a hang up I have, but I wouldn't do it. Chestnut oak, if you live where this one grows and it just barely get into my area, is usually a sweeter acorn, and it's one to look for. There's Gamble's oak, that's more of a western one. Blue oak, um, red oak, or black oak, and those red oak and black oak do tend to be more tannic. Actually, though, just a couple of years ago, I was in an old family cemetery, and there was a big live oak. And live oaks have small acorns and are usually so tannic you cannot eat them. I mean, I have childhood memories of trying to eat them and spitting them out. And, there were some lying there, and I was hungry, and I thought, hey, why not? Picked up one, crushed it between my teeth, and it was so sweet. It didn't have even a hint. Maybe there's the slightest hint of tannin. And as I was cleaning up the old graves going back to the Civil War, I just kept picking up handfuls of acorns and eating them. So oaks can be just very individualistic. You're going to have to try them out. There's northern red oak is another one. This is also the time to start looking for beech nuts. The beech nuts are coming in, and they are absolutely wonderful. And then we get into the chestnuts. The American chestnut was killed by a blight. Usually, our chestnuts will not get large enough to bear fruit. They keep coming back and they keep dying before they can bear nuts, really. There's a lot of mountain legend and lore about that. They say that really before um, a lot of people came in, back when the mountains were kind of wild, um, the American chestnut was such a survival food that everybody enjoyed them, and they kept a lot of families alive through the winter. They were used by Native Americans and white folks and everybody. But once people came in and really started setting down the boundaries and deeds, and the railroads came through, and timber became valuable, and of course, chestnut is valuable timber. Um, People started fencing off their chestnut trees and wouldn't let kids or poor people come on their property and harvest chestnut. And the mountain people, a lot of them have throughout the last 100 years or so, firmly believed that that was a punishment from God for greed. Our greed caused him to blight the chestnut tree so it would no longer yield free food or give profit to the person who had fenced it off and was then selling those nuts to market. I don't know. It may be. I definitely think there is a will and an intelligence in nature, but meanwhile, the Asian chestnuts are still good, and people started bringing them in, and they've been crossing them, and we now do have varieties that have partial genetics from the American chestnut and partial from Asian that grow and produce chestnuts. And so we can once again have chestnuts roasting on an open fire. But one variety of chestnut that never went away was the chinkapin. It's basically a small chestnut tree that bears small chestnut, and that's one. Keep an eye out for it. You'll still see them at old homesteads, just like you will old apple trees, and you can certainly grow them, and they are disease resistant, unlike the American chestnut. The hawthorns are coming into berry now. Good time to start looking for those. Hawthorns are so good for the heart. Hawthorns are just an excellent tonic. They're good for the immune system. American mountain ash was the plant I was trying so hard to remember. American mountain ash grows mainly up north, but is throughout the Appalachian Mountains. And like I said, between my house in North Carolina and Virginia Tech, you will see them sides of the roads everywhere. They're a wonderful berry. They're tart, they're astringent, but they're so good for you. And absolutely the hickories. Squirrels are having a field day with the hickory nuts up there. We got shellbark hickory. We got shagbark hickory. We've got mockernut hickory. Mockernut so called because the shell is so thick and hard, it would drive you almost insane to try to get a little bit of fruit out of the nut. Very closely related are the walnuts, black walnut. It's nearing the time to harvest black walnuts. Basically let them fall off the tree. The husk will turn black. You can kind of knock them off the tree if you want to. Let them sit. I don't think some people say fresh walnuts are easier to shell than older walnuts. I found that after they actually sit for a season, they're better. And then you want to soak them in hot water, and that shell come off a little bit easier, but still, you know. I remember one time at my grandfather's farm, they just left them in the driveway and kind of drove over them until they were cracked, and then we picked out the meat and started putting them in cakes and walnut ice cream. Oh my gosh, my grandmother's homemade vanilla ice cream with black walnuts in it. You have never tasted anything better in your entire life. Take those walnuts, put them in a frying pan, just kind of medium heat with a little butter, candy them with some sugar, and then put them in with some homemade vanilla ice cream. Uh, It's you cannot buy in a store. Butternut is another hickory in the same family. And I'm thinking that's kind of wrapping up our fall foraging. There's a lot out there. There's some root vegetables. There's still a few greens. You may find some watercress, like I said. Most things are starting to brown up. Absolutely. There's still a few berries left on some trees. There are some tree fruits, the apples and all, the prickly pear. It's a wonderful time to get out and enjoy the fall before it's cool enough to hunt. You can still do a little fishing. It's just a great time to go and stock up on these wild foods. We have a principle in herbalism and permaculture and all related fields, that the foods that we grow locally, whether in our own garden or the wild foods that grow with us in our region, are going to be the highest value, most nutritious, and most medicinally potent. They're the ones that are going to keep us alive. Y'all, it's just a wonderful time to be outside. I hope you enjoy it, and this is a great time to enjoy the campfires and the fire pit in the backyard. Be careful, don't let it get out of hand, but do enjoy being in nature and spending time with the people you care about and your old dogs and everything else. So have a good one, and I'll see you here next week. The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.